Konnichiwa, Senpai desu. When it comes to shading, a lot of people would just randomly paint a dark area over the character without any sense of purpose or direction. They don't know where exactly the shadow should be, they don't know what shape the shadow should take, and they don't know what color to use, like it's a guessing game. But as opposed to what many think, shading is not exactly random. There's actually a structure to it. I like to call it controlled chaos. And there are various tools to control and manipulate shadows to bring out the effect we desire in our illustration. So today, I'm going to walk you through various methods of shading, from beginner level to professional. Let's begin. Two-tone shading is one of the most basic techniques of shading. To apply this technique, you need to first identify the terminator. No, not this terminator. This one. It's basically the line that separates the light part from the shadow part. Let's take a sphere as an example and apply the two-tone shading on it. Notice how the shadow changes when the light comes from different directions. This is pretty easy to visualize since these are simple shapes, but things get messy when you start shading a character. Why? Because you got distracted by the details such as hair and clothing. It's easy to overlook the simple geometries of a character's anatomy beneath all these elements. But no worries, all you need to do is simply toggle off the line art layer and reopen the geometries layer underneath. The cylinders and cubes will help you to visualize the shadows much easier. Now, just because your character looks more 3D doesn't mean you're done. You can proceed to add color, maybe throw in some extra highlights on the hair. This is called cell shading. It's all about two tones, light and dark. If you can do this while keeping in mind the basic shapes of your character, you're on the right track. When a light source hits this ball, it splits into two tones, light and dark. In the light tone, it can be further divided into mid-tone and highlight. As for the dark tone, it can be split into core shadow and terminator. Notice how the terminator is darker than the core shadow. That's because of the reflective light. The reflective light bounces off the ground and hits the ball, causing the core shadow to appear brighter compared to the terminator. This change in light and shadow is caused by the ball itself. Now since the ball is blocking the light, a shadow will form. This is the cast shadow. Within the cast shadow, the shadow will become gradually softer if the light source is farther away from the ball. Meanwhile, the surface of the ball which contacts the ground is the occlusion shadow. This is the darkest part, and that's a brief explanation of light and shadow. Now, let's examine the problem. While we know all these 7 tones, why do the results often not meet our expectations when we apply them? That's probably why you came to this video. To give you an analogy, these 7 tones are like 7 different spices and sauces, and the problem is, you might be using too much seasoning. So why not keep the tones down and make everything simpler? Here's my solution. As a beginner, you should start with two-tone shading. As you get better at drawing, add more tones gradually. Learning cell shading is a must before turning pro. But before we delve into that, let me tell you about today's sponsor, Coloso. Coloso is an online art teaching platform on a mission to make professional education accessible to everyone. At Coloso, you'll discover a diverse range of classes, from anime-style character illustration to 3D animation. In just a few days, Coloso will be launching an all-new art course by UA Sensei. This class mainly focuses on illustrating original characters and how to make a career out of it. You will also obtain invaluable advice on freelancing such as client management, pricing, and industry insights. Through 16 exercises, your drawing approach will be transformed as you gain advanced illustration knowledge from the course. So if you want to embark on a transformative journey to enhance your skills and turn your art into a fulfilling career, be among the first to join this course. For those who are eager to dive into lessons immediately, there's another course that's already live. Created by Alice Wu Sensei, this beginner-friendly class covers everything you need to excel at creating anime-style illustration. It's tailored to help self-taught artists with a focus on fundamentals, rendering, shading, coloring, and other critical elements of anime-style drawing. If shading is a struggle, this class is designed for you. Right now, both courses come with an exclusive discounted coupon. If you're interested, you can find the link in the description and pinned comment below. Firstly, prepare a line art. Then, use a very light gray color to cover the surface of your character. On the very same layer, choose a darker tone or color to create the strong contrast between the light and dark tones to split your character into two tones. Toggle your geometry layer if you need to. After establishing the two-tone shading, we can now begin to add local color to our character. Create new layers and fill in the color for each part of the character, such as the skin, hair, eyes, etc. Remember to set these color layers to multiply. Finally, create another layer and simply add highlights to the hair and eyes. Adding highlights to the eyes is a technique often used in photography and film. It's called catchlight. Feel free to search it up if you want to know more. But basically, the character or the person looks more alive and less intimidating if there is a highlight in their eyes. So make sure you add those two little dots for both eyes. And it's done. This is for those who have mastered the basics and wish to take their shading to the next level. Generally, this style of shading is all about adding more tones, but it must be balanced. Let's talk about how you can add extra tones in the light and dark tones. These are just my personal rules, so it's up to you if you want to apply them to yourself. Let's start by applying the light tones on the hair part. Firstly, add some midtones to smoothen the light transition. Then, add another tone on top of it, but make sure that this extra tone cannot be darker than the core shadow. This is very important. For the dark tones, it becomes a lot more complicated, because underneath dark tones, we have core shadow, terminator, reflective light, cast shadow, and occlusion shadow. It's much easier to look at the entire dark tone as the core shadow itself. As someone who is just starting, I recommend you add only terminators and cast shadows. So here's how you do it. Use a darker tone to paint the terminator, which is the line that separates the light tones from the dark tones. Then for the cast shadow, use another tone that is lighter than the terminator but darker than the core shadow. Cast shadows appear where the object is blocked by the light, like the hair, the neck, the wrinkles, etc. Now you have a total of 6 tones. In cell shading, we only use a maximum of 3 tones. As you can see, the more tones we use, the more pro our drawing will appear to be. The tricky part is whether we can handle it well. For starters, 6 tones should be enough. Well, if you think you're capable of adding the rest of the tones, such as reflective light and occlusion shadow, without affecting your own work, go ahead. Feel free to support me on Patreon, I really appreciate it. Please drop a like, subscribe to my channel, and follow me on Twitter. DM me if you want a commission from me. Alright, that's all from me. Já, né, boys?